My name is Ashley Rumschlag, and I am the National Director of domesticshelters.org, which is a program of Alliance for Hope International. I'm joined by Rachel Myers, our Senior Digital Services Specialist, and Hannah Craig, our Director of Content. Rachel and Hannah will be working behind the scenes to monitor the chat and the Q&A. Today's presentation will be 60 minutes and will focus on a simple approach to health and looking at how our food culture has evolved over time. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. This webinar is made possible by our partnership with Verizon through the Verizon Skill Forward program. Verizon Skill Forward is an upskilling initiative designed to equip you and your community with the professional skills needed to remain relevant in this ever-changing job market. Verizon Skill Forward offers over 400 courses and 100 professional certificate programs completely for free, and topics ranging from leadership to AI, coding, Excel, graphic design, nutrition, and so much more. In the chat, you'll find a link to learn more and get started. And if you're interested in promoting the program within your community, please reach out to Karianne at skillforward@allianceforhope.com. This year, thanks to our partnership with Verizon, we're committed to helping you find small but impactful ways to focus on self-care as part of our 2026 self-care webinar series. This includes today's webinar, as well as our popular Cultivating Calm series, which we're excited to announce will be coming back on Thursdays throughout April at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. We'll drop a link in the chat so you can get registered to join us on Thursdays. You can also find our past webinars by visiting our webinar archive on our website. I'll share that website for you, domesticshelters.org/webinars. A huge thank you to Verizon for making this series possible. As I mentioned, domesticshelters.org is a program of Alliance for Hope International. Our goal at the Alliance is to create communities of safety, hope, and healing. To learn more about our various programs, visit allianceforhope.org. There are tons of resources for you to utilize in your work to support survivors. Just a reminder that live closed captionings are available for this webinar. To enable these, please click the Show Captions button. A transcript will also be available within a week of the presentation. All of you are in listen-only mode, which means your microphones and your cameras will be turned off throughout the entire presentation. And this is very important. Please do use the Q&A box if you have any questions throughout the presentation. We likely won't have time for a Q&A session at the end, but all of those questions will be gathered, and Karianne will take time to answer those, and we'll include that in the shared resources folder that's sent along with the slides after the presentation. Of course, the chat is available if you want to chat amongst other attendees, and of course, introduce yourself so we know where everyone's joining us from. And like I mentioned, within a week, we're going to send you the video, a certificate, transcript, the recording, and then, of course, additional resources. All right, with that, please welcome Karianne Gwinn. Karianne is our Verizon Skill Forward Project Coordinator, certified yoga teacher, functional nutritional therapy practitioner, a psychosomatic practitioner. She has a lot of skills, and she's really excited to be here today. I know she's been working really hard on this presentation, and we're just so excited to get to talk about nutrition today. Welcome, Karianne.
Thank you, Ashley. Hearing you say all of those titles made me think I really need to stop pursuing education.
Never.
That was a mouthful. Thank you so much. Thank you to domesticshelters.org for having me on this webinar. It is seriously an honor. As we get started, I want to give you a gentle reminder to be present. This webinar is part of our self-care series, and one of the ways we're caring for ourselves is by giving the gift of our undivided attention. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. So please close out email, turn off notifications as long as they're unnecessary. I know there are situations in which you may need them, but any unnecessary notifications, and just be here. Let's take a moment, take a breath. I'm pretending that we're in the same room together, and I hope that you can pretend that as well. So a little bit about my journey into nutrition. The main catalyst was when I spent the school year abroad for my first year of college in a small town just outside of Quito, Ecuador. And that year, I made some of the best friends of my life, several of whom I am still very close to this day. One of them, though, was a real jerk. His name was Brutus, or rather, that's what I ended up calling him. I didn't name him until we had known each other intimately for 10 years. Brutus, as it turned out, was a parasite, Giardia to be exact. Brutus wreaked havoc on my life for 10 years before his true identity was revealed. AKA, before anyone figured out that I didn't, in fact, have irritable bowel syndrome, I had a gnarly parasite. During my time with Brutus, I tried so many things to feel better. And sometimes it was to pursue health, but when that seemed like a hopeless cause, sometimes I made changes to pursue a certain body shape or weight loss because you can take the girl out of Southern California, but you cannot take the Southern California out of the girl. I went gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, sugar-free. I was all kinds of free, except that I was completely imprisoned by stomach pain and severe digestive issues. And then once Brutus was taken care of, I didn't get better. In fact, I got worse in a lot of ways. And then at the young age of 28, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer called gray zone lymphoma. This journey of cancer is what really taught me what the science of hope is. And that's a story for another time. But what I do want you to hear is this, that gray zone lymphoma had a 50% progression free survival rate for 2 years. And that means that it was a complete coin toss whether or not I would have a recurrence in my first 2 years in remission or not. And spoiler alert, but I am coming up on 9 years cancer free in just a few days with no progression and no recurrences. I am so relieved and so grateful. While I was undergoing conventional treatment, I kept wondering though if there was another way. Like, what didn't I know? Why did this happen to me? I came across a docu-series that totally changed my life. It was about cancer. And from there, I really dove headfirst into research around cancer cells, what feeds them, how a PET scan works, the pros and cons of chemo, and so much more. And my mind was seriously blown. Meanwhile, as I'm undergoing inpatient chemotherapy, I was told, eat whatever, a calorie is a calorie. And they literally said, as long as you're eating and keeping your weight up, it doesn't really matter what you're eating. They're like French fries, milkshakes, whatever. What a load of baloney. P.S. Don't eat bologna. It's not a good protein. I didn't listen though. I changed everything. I changed my diet. I changed my personal care products, my stress management, my detoxification. And on April 29th, 2017, after 576 hours of high dose chemotherapy, I walked out of the hospital after, oh, I'm getting emotional, after my last chemo session completely cancer free. 6 months later, as my hair was still growing back, I began an intensive program to become a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. There was a huge knowledge gap that I had experienced firsthand that needed filling, especially in the world of oncology. And I was absolutely determined to be a part of the solution. And just, I want to clarify for those that are unfamiliar, a holistic nutritionist, like a nutritional therapy practitioner, is focused on whole person, personalized lifestyle based care. And a registered dietitian is generally more focused on disease, standardized treatment, and a little bit more clinical in their approach to health. So if you're wondering what the difference between those two things is, now you know. As an Enneagram 8, who else is an 8 out there? Give me a woo woo. Enneagram 8's the challenger. My instinct is usually to overhaul everything, to go big, to go cold turkey, to turn my life upside down. And that is exactly what I did when I was diagnosed with cancer. It's also what I did when I cut gluten out of my life. It worked for me. But it doesn't work for everyone. And in my clinical experience, what I've seen time and time again is this. A client will make a gigantic change in a moment of inspiration or desperation, but it's usually not sustainable. And then they fall off the horse real hard and never want to get back on the horse because, ouch, if I got on and I fell off, then I'm probably going to fall off again. I wonder who else has been there. I know that I have. while the cold turkey thing sometimes works for me, sometimes it doesn't. It's a moving target. And that's why this webinar is about simplifying nutrition to get back to the basics. We do not have to be excellent or perfect. We just need to do a little bit better today than we did yesterday. We can do that. You can do that. At the end of the day, a body that is nourished, hydrated, and well cared for is going to be so much more capable of greatness in all ways, of pursuing goals, achieving them, being generally more joyful and well. And so I'm curious to check in and see where we all are in our confidence around healthy food choices. There is going to be a poll that pops up in a second. And I want to ask you, how confident do you feel in making healthy food choices? Oops, this is not the right poll. Oh shoot, you guys will figure it out on the back end. But oh, here we go. Yeah, how confident do you feel in making healthy food choices? One is not confident at all. Two is a little bit confident. Three is neutral, or maybe you never think about this, and that's okay. Four is pretty confident. Five is very confident. You know what you're doing. You don't even need to be here. Our fives probably aren't even in the house right now. Okay, so we have a, okay, quite confident, a little bit confident, some neutral coming in. Okay, awesome. A handful of people who are super confident and a handful that are not confident at all. No matter where you are welcome here because the reality is that it has become very difficult to be a healthy person because what we've done is we have complicated things to no end. What is healthy? Is it vegan? Is it carnivore? Is it ketogenic diet? No, it's Mediterranean. Wait, it's a calorie deficit. Wait, you have to eat 3,000 calories a day. The inundation of info and conflicting info is completely staggering. It is staggering. And I don't want to add more noise to that. But we need to know what we're working with. And seriously, it is no wonder that we feel stuck because we're in this place of analysis paralysis. How in the world did we get here? So in a lot of our self-care webinars, we've talked about how modern life has gotten so far from what we're designed for in a lot of ways. Technology use, community living or lack thereof, movement or lack thereof, and so much more because we're cave people living in a modern world. And honestly, it's not going so well. In our country, it is estimated that 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy. Metabolically unhealthy. Okay, 88%. So think insulin resistance, excess belly fat, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, etc. To be honest, I am a part of that 88% right now. I am dealing with my own ongoing health issues, so I am not here to speak to you as a person who has arrived and nailed it and mastered this. I am right there with you, and I wonder if you are there as well, because health is now something that we have to work very hard for, not something that we can easily slip into. It is countercultural. If you're not swimming upstream, you're floating downstream. But I want you to hear this. This conversation is not about fixing ourselves, it is about caring for ourselves. And there is a big difference. Before we go on, I want to say this. Talking about health and nutrition, it can bring up a lot of feelings of shame. Chief among them is shame, embarrassment. I should know better. I should do better. It's easy to feel like we failed ourselves. It's easy to see, oh my gosh, I have so far to go to be where I want to be. But I wonder if we can commit to rebelling against those feelings of shame if and when they arise. Because knowledge is power. Only once we know better can we do better. So I want to encourage all of us to give ourselves compassion. We're living in one of the most stressful times in history. It's also likely that just about everyone on this webinar has experienced relational trauma in some way, shape, or form. And that in and of itself has an impact on our food choices, our hormones, our physical well-being, our nervous systems, and what our bodies do with the food that we give to them. So then to truly pursue health, as opposed to just not being sick, it can feel like we are constantly swimming upstream because we are. So can we be gentle with ourselves? I want us again to just pause and take a deep breath. If you are with me, will you type I will be gentle with myself in the chat. This is our commitment to ourselves, but also I want you to see that there are other people who are committed to this gentleness as well. You are not alone in it. You're not the only person trying to be gentle. Yes, Judith, Amy, Amanda, Paula, Michelle, Beth, Nancy. Yes, there's so much power in just speaking that out loud. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, a quick note, this is not medical advice. My goal is to empower you with information and tools, but you and you alone are the expert on your body. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and for the love of all things healthy, please partner with a trusted healthcare provider when you're making decisions about your health. Okay, so let's talk about how we got here. And to do that, we need to acknowledge the really unfortunate, often history of nutrition. So prior to the industrialization of food, there wasn't nutrition as we know it today. People were living off the land, they were in touch with the natural rhythms of life. Food was seasonal because foods like strawberries or potatoes, they weren't available all year long. People weren't following diets back in the day. There was no keto, vegan, gluten-free labels because there were not labels on food at all. Food was not something to analyze or overthink. It was just food. Hunger was present and eating happened with what was available. Our ancestors were eating things like meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, occasionally fruit, and properly prepared grains, which I will get to more on this later. Foods that came from the earth or came from animals, and that's pretty much it. Everything was perishable. And so their food was local, it was seasonal. You ate what was available where you lived, and it changed throughout the year. There was therefore natural variety built in, which was amazing for the microbiome. And there was also an oscillation between feast and famine. People were not feasting all the time in the way that we are today. They were cycling in and out of feast and famine depending on the season and the availability of food. And the amazing thing is that there are processes that get kicked into gear in our bodies when we are fasting. One of them is called autophagy. So after about 17 hours of fasting, our bodies begin to engage in a process called autophagy, which means self-eating. Yum, right? It's like an internal recycling process where damaged immune cells get eaten by our little Pac-Men, also known as macrophages. Pac-Man is just my fun term for it. But they ate unruly cells, dysfunctional cells, they all got demolished, and repair happened because there wasn't so much energy being spent on digestion. It could go to actually repairing damaged tissues in the body. So you can imagine what has happened to us when we are constantly eating and we are not activating autophagy like our ancestors did. So what's the big deal with the modern diet? Haven't our bodies adapted after all this time? And the short answer is no. But I'm also going to give you the long answer. In the 1930s, there was a dentist named Dr. Weston A. Price. In his dental practice, Dr. Price began seeing that people were developing cavities at alarming rates all of a sudden. And he wanted to understand this. What is going on? What's causing this? Is this happening all over the world? So he essentially retired from his dental practice and started traveling the world, studying all different groups of people, including indigenous people that were eating ancestral diets, as well as people who had been introduced to Western foods like processed grains, sugar, etc. And he saw people with flawless bone structure and teeth, and people who had horribly rotting teeth and nutrient deficiencies. So, what was the difference? And what he observed in these groups of people eating incredibly nutrient dense diets was that they could be categorized as ancestral diets for the sake of this conversation. They were healthy and they had amazing teeth. And not just that, but they had spacious mouths, great airways, strong bones, and no cavities. Their ancestral diets consisted of lots of animal proteins and fats. And they were using the whole animal because hunter-gatherers, I mean, these aren't hunter-gatherers, this was in the 30s, but people had to use this. Indigenous people were hunting and gathering. They used the whole animal, the organ meats, the bones for broth, the animal fats, the eyeballs. Nothing was wasted. And they also prepared their food differently. So when they did eat nuts and beans and grains, if they were available to them, they soaked, fermented, and slow cooked them. And this made the food easier to digest and helped them actually absorb the nutrients. And this process of soaking things like beans, nuts, and grains helps to break down something called phytic acid, which is often referred to in holistic nutrition as an anti-nutrient because it binds up important nutrients like zinc, iron, calcium, and magnesium, making them difficult, if not impossible, to absorb. And then the fats they were using were things like butter, tallow, lard, olive oil, not the industrial seed oils that are everywhere today. And also, sugar was very limited. It was so occasional, not an all day, everyday thing like it is today. So, when sugar was enjoyed, it was more likely to be from a source like cane sugar. And you might be thinking, Karianne, what the heck is the difference? So, why is this better than processed sugar? For a lot of reasons, but here's one. Our bodies need magnesium to be able to process sugar, and whole foods like sugarcane come with the minerals like magnesium that are needed to support that process. But refined sugar is stripped of those nutrients. So, what does that mean? Well, your body has to steal from your nutrient stores to process the sugar that you ate. So, first, it will steal from your muscle tissue. And then once those magnesium stores are emptied out, it will begin to steal magnesium from your bones. Yikes. Over time, this can contribute to mineral depletion if we aren't really intentional about eating magnesium rich foods or supplementing with magnesium. I find that to be really fascinating and one of these big arguments like, yes, we need to be eating foods in their natural form. Because when we pull on this thread a little bit more, we see the issue with sugar consumption and magnesium deficiency, which can cause things like high blood pressure, muscle cramping, fatigue, and so much more because magnesium is required for over 300 enzyme reactions in our bodies. So being deficient in this nutrient is really problematic. Not to mention that one high sugar snack or meal can impair our body's white blood cell function for up to 5 hours. Do you ever wonder why cold and flu season is so rough? Well, look at all these holidays in cold and flu season that are focused on high carb foods and sugary treats. And I want you to just sit with this photo for a second. It's pretty alarming. We're looking at Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, all in a short span of a few months. So we're basically suppressing our immune systems for months on end by partaking in these indulgences over and over and over. Okay, back to the lifestyle of our indigenous ancestors. This new photo is a lot more peaceful than looking at a bunch of sugar and a sick lady. Their lives required movement and lots of it. They were walking, working, using their bodies all day, every day, and eating and movement were part of the same rhythm of life. So when you zoom out and you look at it, food wasn't stressful. There weren't a million choices. They weren't walking into a grocery store being like, oh my gosh, 37 types of bread. There wasn't this constant questioning of, is this good for me or bad for me? It was simple, it was seasonal, it was nourishing because that's the way that food was meant to be before we messed it all up. Dr. Price also studied people who had recently gained access to westernized food. And I don't even want to show you the pictures from his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, because it's honestly quite alarming. So trust me on this one, their teeth were not good. Bone structure, not good. Facial features, totally different than those who were on their ancestral diet. And time again, Dr. Price found that the introduction of industrialized foods was wreaking havoc on the overall health of people that were consuming it. And that, my friends, is what our diet is today. It is industrialized, it is processed. So much of what you see in the grocery store is not coming from a farm of any type. It's so far from what our bodies are designed to digest and utilize. And that's really the point that I want to land here because we're going to talk about a lot today in a short period of time. But at the end of the day, getting back to the basics isn't about finding the perfect diet. It's actually about coming back to the types of foods and the kinds of rhythms of life that the human body has recognized for ages and ages. in a wonderful book called The Big Fat Surprise. How amazing is that title? By author Nina Teicholz. She writes about a German doctor named Otto Schaefer, and he studied Canadian Inuit people. Some tribes that he studied were getting Western foods delivered to them, like flour pastries, biscuits, tea, molasses, and some were not. And the tribes that ate their traditional food did not have heart disease, had amazingly low blood pressure, no vitamin D deficiency, and no cancer. This is what she writes, summarizing Dr. Otto's findings. By contrast, wherever the Inuit ate carbohydrates instead of their traditional food, their health declined. Large numbers of women and children suffered from anemia, and he found his first case of diabetes previously unreported in the Canadian Arctic in an Inuit eating these civilized foods. He also found chronic ear infections and bad teeth. In some cases, tooth decay was so severe that some Inuit made their own dentures out of walrus tusks. To Schaefer, it seemed likely that the Inuit, long adapted to their fat and protein diet, were unable to cope with the starches and sugars to which they had been introduced. Whoa. And this research and observation totally confirms and correlates with what Dr. Weston A. Price discovered in his travels and research. And just in case you're not convinced yet, we've got one more. In the same book, we read that the British Royal Navy's surgeon, Captain Thomas L. Cleve, had seen the same phenomenon in so many remote areas to which he traveled in the early 1900s that he called all chronic illnesses the saccharine diseases, because so many of these ailments arrived in concert with the introduction of refined carbohydrates, principally sugar and white flour. In the observations and research of so many, we see over and over again the introduction of Western foods immediately followed by the onset of Western diseases, which had not otherwise existed for these people. And interestingly, all of the foods introduced required significant insulin production. Insulin, as you may know, is the hormone released by the pancreas to usher glucose into our cells to be used as energy. And ideally, we create and utilize insulin fairly infrequently if we're on a mostly protein and dietary fat diet. And our cells happily accept the glucose when it's ushered in. But with the elevated carbohydrate intake, we are demanding the pancreas to create insulin regularly and expecting our cells to keep receiving it, but this cannot go on forever. Our bodies, as we learn from all of these tribes, are not made to be on a chronically high carbohydrate diet. When we eat this way, we eventually become insulin resistant or resistant to insulin, meaning our cells are basically like, enough already, I can't do it anymore, leave me alone. Because remember, 88% of the US is metabolically unhealthy, and it's no wonder why. Because the circulating insulin, when it's just floating around in the body, becomes inflammatory, which can cause low-grade inflammation, joint pain, lead to type 2 diabetes, cause brain fog, increase fat storage, and contribute to cardiovascular disease. Yikes. Meanwhile, our bodies keep sensing the glucose is too high because remember, the glucose isn't going into the cell anymore. And our pancreas continues to make insulin that isn't even able to do its job. So you can see why this would be a big issue as it continues. And then to make matters worse, eating a high carbohydrate diet is like building a fire and only using kindling. So if you want to keep the fire burning, but all you use is kindling, you're going to have to keep adding more and more and more because it burns so quickly. What you really need is some nice thick logs. In this analogy, the kindling is the carbohydrates and the logs are fat and protein. They offer a much slower burn when it comes to your fire, also known as your energy. Speaking of fat, let's talk about it. The three-letter F word. Many of us here likely grew up hearing about how fat's terrible, how it makes us fat, and that we should be eating margarine and low-fat yogurt and going on low-fat diets lest we become overweight. We were taught fat is your foe, not your friend. It turns out this is wrong. I absolutely grew up in a margarine household. Anybody else? But now we know that excess insulin production is inflammatory and that fat is actually the only macronutrient that does not trigger insulin production. So I wonder if we can just start befriending it again, maybe stop sipping on the haterade towards fat. You might wonder why this happened. A huge part of this is because of a researcher named Ansel Keys. He led a study called the Seven Countries Study. And I'm going to breeze through this pretty quick right now, but he is criticized in holistic spaces for essentially cherry picking his data and only using the things that supported his hypothesis that the consumption of saturated fat leads to heart disease. He was so convinced of this. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend the book, The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Take-Holes. It is so good. But Keyes followed multiple populations across a lot of countries, found a correlation between saturated fat intake and increases of heart disease, but not always. And he did not publish the not always findings. In those cases, he chose to omit it. So we have this 7 countries study that essentially basically demonized fat and became the birth of the low fat era. But guess what? Food tastes pretty awful without fat. So what was added? It was sugar and eventually high fructose corn syrup. Okay, check out this yogurt. Who else remembers Yoplait yogurt? I can actually feel the lid cutting the corners of my mouth as I look at the picture that's coming up in just a second. Total millennial alert. Here we go. Here it comes. Oh, sorry. It's already there. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I had the chat blocking it. When we look at this, I pulled the nutritional content specifically. Look at the sugar content here. It is 18 grams of sugar. And you might be thinking, like, what does that even mean? How much sugar is 18 grams? Well, here's what you can do. You can do this in anything. You take the total sugar and you divide it by 4. That is going to give you how many teaspoons of sugar it really is. In this case, it is 4.5 teaspoons. And if my bakers out there will know that that is 1.5 tablespoons of sugar just in this low fat yogurt. I mean, I shouldn't do this. It is low fat, but we grew up thinking because it's low fat, it won't make me fat. And it has a ridiculous amount of sugar in it. So I want you to let that sink in. When you look at something like this, you see how far we've moved from a nutrient dense, traditional whole foods diet and our ancestors' way of living. Things got really complicated and for good reason. Another thing that has been demonized is stomach acid. And honestly, I was on the fence about whether or not I wanted to include this, but you aren't what you eat, despite what you may have heard. You are what you absorb. And without stomach acid, you are not going to be absorbing much. And here is why. Digestion is a multi-part process. If I asked you right now, where does digestion start? I am guessing that the vast majority of you would say that it starts in your mouth with chewing, and that would be a really understandable answer. And while chewing is a really important part of digestion, it actually starts a bit further upstream. It starts in your brain. When we look at health through the lens of nervous system regulation, which of course I love, we can see how important it is to truly be in a state of rest and digest, otherwise known as a parasympathetic state. When we are in a state of rest and digest, this is what happens. We engage in the beautiful process of cooking, in which we actually smell our food. Our brain's like, ooh, we're going to eat. Let's start getting ready. And the brain sends a message to the parietal cells in the stomach to start creating stomach acid. And just imagine it like pouring into the stomach. You're properly hydrated in this perfect scenario. So you have plenty of water to make the hydrochloric acid necessary to break down food particles. And then when it's time to consume said food, you chew it really well, which helps to trigger the production of salivary amylase, which is a digestive enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. And then once the food goes into your stomach, it is this beautiful acidic pool and it churns and burns your food that lands there. And then next comes your small intestine. So think of the space like between your stomach and your small intestine like a speakeasy. Your stomach needs to have a secret password to open the door to the small intestine. And in the case of digestion, the secret password is a highly concentrated and potent stomach acid. So let's think between like a 1 and a 3 on a pH scale. Very, very, very acidic. When the door to the small intestine opens, the presence of that very acidic stomach acid initiates the release of digestive enzymes from the pancreas and sodium bicarbonate, which is our acid neutralizing compound, so that it doesn't burn the small intestine. Nutrients get absorbed primarily in the small intestine, and then we're on our way to a really great digestive process. Yay! But when we're not in a state of rest and digest, the cascade of digestion does not go so well. Instead, we don't smell our food or engage in the act of eating. Let's say we're just mindlessly eating, or we're in conflict with a spouse or a partner, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons we can be stressed, right? Our stomachs will not be releasing adequate stomach acid. Therefore, the door to the small intestine will not open until it is forced by us just shoving more food on top of it. Not ideal. And then digestive enzymes aren't released. Neither is the sodium bicarbonate that's required to neutralize that acid. And in this case, the stomach acid, it still is going to be slightly acidic, just not acidic enough to open the trap door. So the food that goes into the stomach begins to putrefy, rancidify, ferment in the stomach, and eventually it bubbles up into the esophagus. So now it's too acidic for the esophagus, but not acidic enough to open the door of the small intestine. Many of us have learned that stomach acid is a terrible thing that we need to suppress. But as you can see, it's not just that it's not bad, it's actually necessary for digestion, and we need to support it, not suppress it. In the book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, Doctors Wright and Leonard go so far as to say that in their clinical experience, 9 out of 10 patients with acid reflux and GERD, it's not that they have too much stomach acid. It's actually that their stomach acid is not acidic enough to bring about the digestive process that I just described. And that is why I strongly advise my clients to do everything they can to get into a state of relaxation before eating, because your nervous system impacts your digestion greatly. So maybe you consider taking a few deep breaths before you eat. Let yourself smell your food. Let your brain be involved. And if you can avoid it, for the love, please do not eat while you're driving. I get it. I've done this too, but our meals deserve to be eaten, not inhaled mindlessly. Okay. Our bodies are better off for it as well. You might even choose to engage in some vagal toning exercises before you eat, like gently massaging the sides of the neck, humming, singing. Deep breathing exercises also engage the vagus nerve, which controls the parasympathetic portion of the nervous system. And even though you can't see your vagus nerve on the outside, this may sound like a woo-woo thing. It is not. It's our physiology. Because again, we are what we absorb. You can have the healthiest diet in the world, but if you are constantly stressed, you're eating on the go, etc., you are not going to be absorbing the nutrients to their full potential. What a miss and what a waste. When it comes to nutrition, I want to help you get the most bang out of your buck. Remember that analogy about the fire? The reality is that buying bundles of kindling, or in our situation, carbohydrate-laden foods, it feels more affordable. But look at how often you're having to keep buying and eating them. Also, as a cancer survivor myself, I can say this. Having a life-threatening illness is very expensive, and investing in your health now is actually saving you money in the long run. So let's talk about first a perfect world, and then we'll talk about the challenges at hand. So in a perfect world, we would all be able to access high quality animal protein without it breaking the bank. We could buy pasture-raised chicken and grass-fed beef and pasture-raised eggs. And I'm wondering if you noticed any similarities there. Do you hear these qualifiers? The way that these animals are raised is in their title. And it's easy to think that these types of qualifiers don't matter. We're like, oh, it's just a gimmick. It's just trendy. It's not. They do matter. When the animals that we eat get sunshine, they're on their natural diets, we reap the benefits of having far superior nutrient profiles. And for the record, I need to say this. All of this raised on a vegetarian diet, specifically related to chickens and eggs, is not all that it is cracked up to be. So you are not going to fall for this anymore, okay? Because chickens are actually omnivores. They are not herbivores. So if they're eating an all vegetarian diet, that should set off alarm bells like, ooh, this is not good. Do not be fooled. If we were to compare conventional eggs with pasture-raised eggs, this is what we would find. Quality matters. If you want to learn more about this, my fellow functional nutritional therapy practitioner, Beth Manos-Bricky, has this great blog post. She talks all about the different types of eggs and what it means. And in her post, she cites a nutritional comparison done in 2007 by Mother Earth News, where they found that in comparison to conventionally raised eggs, pasture-raised eggs contain 2/3 more vitamin A, 2 times more omega-3 fatty acids, here anti-inflammatory, 3 times more vitamin E, 7 times more beta carotene. And then additionally, depending on how much sunlight the chickens get, they have upwards of 4 to 6 times more vitamin D than conventionally raised eggs. Okay, whoa, big deal. And I'm not trying to say I'm a mind reader here, but I feel like I can read some minds right now. Okay, and they're saying, but Karianne, pasture-raised eggs are expensive. It is exorbitant. And trust me, I hear you. Most of the time, though, most of the time, this is a question of values, not of affordability. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to encourage you to have your own internal dialogue about it, or even talk to a friend in your life about it. And that question is, what do you value? If we took a look at your impulse buys on Amazon or at the thrift store or Temu or Facebook Marketplace, would you be able to say that you really need those things? Or were you chasing dopamine? Because a vast majority of the time we're chasing dopamine, or we're trying to silence grief or depression or any other manner of emotional states. So instead of I can't afford to eat well, what if you say, I don't value eating well? I don't value nourishing myself. I value Temu. I value impulse buys on Marketplace. I wonder how that lands for you hearing that. If you say, I don't value eating well, I don't value nourishing myself, does that feel true? Because we may need to shift some spending habits and values in order to prioritize healthy eating. You are worthy of that shift. You are worthy of the investment of eating well. And in turn, you're getting more bang for your buck, truly. Our food quality matters not because it's some cool thing or some kind of flex like, ooh, my pasture-raised eggs. It is a health investment. And in a world where so much is out of our control, this is something that we can lovingly control for ourselves. This is a form of self-care. I hope that you are able to see that. Okay, let's take a pause. Let's take a breath. Let's check in. How you feeling? What's arising for you? You are welcome to merely notice this in yourself. You are also welcome to share in the chat if that feels supportive to you. I want you to know that we're all in this together, okay? We are all in this together. And when we acknowledge how we are, I feel seen, I feel convicted, I'm stressed, I feel hopeful and motivated, it helps strengthen our solidarity around these efforts towards health. How are you feeling? I feel guilty and shameful. I feel enlightened. Opposite ends of the spectrum, totally understandable, both sides. Sad. Yeah, we've veered a really, really long ways. Overwhelmed, hopeful. And we're all gonna be approaching this in a different way. And I want to encourage you to talk to someone that you really trust. I love this. Keith, way to go. Walking pad, walk 2.1 miles. Man, Keith is habit stacking right now in an awesome way. Feel like I'm not nourishing my children, feeling guilty, learning, and we'll take this home. I love it. Overwhelmed but informed. We can be in both places, right? We can be both of those. I want to learn more. I'm excited. I was just eating goobers. Relieved. Some of us have been saying this since the 90s. Absolutely, Tracy. Yes. But grabbed water. Yes. Take a water break if you haven't already. Okay, so let's get back to eggs and protein. When it comes to protein, there's a lot of conflicting info about how to utilize it. Is it the main course? Is it more of a side dish? Do we go for lean meat, fatty meat? So many questions, right? If we are to follow a more ancestral diet, like the healthy tribes that Dr. Price and Dr. Otto and all of these people studied, this is what we should roughly be aiming for, okay? Let's map it out. Also, it needs to be mentioned there's not one size fits all recommendation. If you have Polynesian lineage and your ancestors ate high amounts of fruits year round, you might be able to tolerate fruits in a higher natural sugars diet on a regular basis than someone who is of Alaskan heritage and their ancestors ate fatty meat and protein all year round. So I hope you see where I'm going with this. We cannot say this is the diet for everyone because every body is different. And at the end of the day, you alone are the expert on your body. So be your own guinea pig. We don't need to go like do this crazy cold turkey thing. Notice your energy levels, your digestive function, your sleep patterns, etc. when you tweak your eating patterns or how much water you drink. Notice it. And then think, are these changes I want to stick with? Do I like sleeping better? Do I like having more energy? That's up to you. Maybe not. Maybe it's not worth it, but maybe it is. Generally speaking, though, let's aim for foods in their natural form, okay? This plate is a great example. It's from ancestralsupplements.com. And while I'm not promoting their supplement line, I am recommending this blog post that's about to be shared in the chat as a fabulous jumping off point for when you're trying to get back to a nutrient dense, whole foods traditional diet. So notice that even the carbs on this plate are coming from plant-based natural resources. So fruits and vegetables, they contain carbs with fiber, which is a great buffer for blood sugar regulation. It also helps us feel satiated longer, prevents the crazy blood sugar roller coaster that comes with refined carbohydrates. And then a little note about carbs, because I'm not an anti-carb girl, but we do need to eat them last. So the protein and the fat are going to create a buffer because those things take longer to digest, and it will help you digest the carbs more slowly, which is what we want. A couple of other fun little things. If you're eating something like potatoes or rice, I highly recommend cooking them the night before, then refrigerating and reheating the next day because the process of cooling them down actually allows the starch to become resistant starch and therefore cause less of a blood sugar spike, which is so cool. Okay, so let's also notice that the majority of this plate is filled with long burning energy in the form of protein and fats. Yum. And before you panic about cholesterol, I strongly encourage you to read The Big Fat Surprise. You are going to learn things that are going to blow your mind. You will even learn in that book that there are people who have adopted this type of ancestral diet, and instead of their cholesterol going up, their serum cholesterol is actually going down, which is pretty amazing. And then their HDL, the good cholesterol, is going up because this is more of an anti-inflammatory way of eating. It just really makes you question everything, right? You might have more questions than answers when you leave this webinar. Here's another little fun fact about cholesterol. It is the building block of vitamin D. So what that means is that when we get sunshine, our body converts cholesterol into vitamin D. And there has been research showing that getting lots of sunshine actually helps lower serum cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, because it gets converted into vitamin D by our amazing, wise, beautiful bodies. Wild, right? The more you know. Okay, hydration. This is another thing that people are like, what the heck? How do we do this? We know water is good for us, right? We know that it makes up 55 to 65% of our body mass, depending on age and gender. And that is a vast majority. So, what we get from this is hydration matters. If I were to take the recommendation of drinking 8 glasses of water a day, I would be dehydrated on a cellular level. And I bet you're like, why? Well, because I don't weigh 128 pounds. Therefore, 68 ounces is not enough for me. This is one of those things that is so widely misunderstood, but I'm going to let you in on the formula. So you take your weight, you divide it by 2. That is how many ounces of water you need to be truly hydrated. That does not take into consideration diuretics consumed, and I will get to that. But back to water, someone who weighs 130 pounds is going to need significantly less water than someone that weighs 250 pounds. And when you think about it, it seems ridiculous that we would all be hydrated with 64 ounces of water. Do you have to pee just thinking about this? Yes, drinking more water is going to make you have to pee more. Ugh, how inconvenient. But I'll tell you what, it is not as inconvenient as brain fog, joint pain, poor digestion, and all the other issues that come with chronic dehydration. Our bodies need water desperately. And maybe you can even choose to reframe the bathroom breaks. Little mindset hack for you. Instead of inconvenience, they're an opportunity. They're an opportunity to get more steps in, to take a couple deep breaths, to say hello to a coworker. It is all in how you approach it. Here's some things to keep in mind with water. Drink your water between meals because when you do this, you're giving your body what it needs to create the hydrochloric acid, emphasis on the hydro. But when you drink it with a meal, you are actually diluting your stomach acid, which makes it less effective for doing its one job. Remember, we want it to be very potent. If you drink diuretics like coffee and soda, you are sadly dehydrating your body further. In my nutrition training, we learned that water needs to be replaced at a 1 to 1.5 ratio for diuretics. So that means if you drink 8 ounces of coffee or soda, you would need to add an additional 12 ounces of water if you're following this guideline to a T. It really makes you question whether or not you want to drink that Diet Coke, right? Maybe a walk around the block would give you the energy you're looking for. And here's the thing, you don't have to go from 8 ounces straight to half your body weight. That would feel bananas. Just aim to increase your water intake by a few ounces each week. So find a water bottle, ideally stainless steel, please not plastic, that you know the ounce capacity of, and use that to keep track because you can do this. Your entire body will thank you. Okay, let's pivot though, and let's say that you have no ability to change anything in your diet right now, as in zero wiggle room financially. You don't buy random things on Amazon. You never purchase anything you don't actually need. And you're just generally like, I can barely get by. I see you, I hear you, I've been there, and I have some good news for you. You can still pursue health completely for free. We've already talked about a lot of those ways to do that, but here are some refreshers. When you're eating, aim to eat your carbs last. First comes fiber, think veggies, then protein and fat, then your carbs. This is going to slow the absorption of glucose. And then after your meals, how can you introduce movement? Can you go on a walk? Can you do some squats? This helps to maintain and even improve insulin sensitivity, which is a very good thing. We want to be sensitive to insulin. We want to be able to welcome glucose when it comes our way, and we don't want it to come our way too often. Get some sunshine when you're able to, especially first thing in the morning. Sunshine's free. It's great for your sleep and circadian rhythm. And then take a couple deep breaths before you eat. Because even if you cannot change the food that you're eating, you can change the way that your body is absorbing those nutrients. And that doesn't cost a thing. And then drinking water is a great way to pursue health as well, as we have discussed at length. And the cost of water, of course, there is a cost to it, but it is likely going to be so small that you won't even notice it on your utility bill. And it is so vital to so many processes in the body. And then here's another tip. If buying fresh produce and things like that for your naturally recurring carbs feels out of reach, or you find yourself letting it go to waste, I'm so guilty of this. Try buying frozen fruits and veggies. The great thing about them is that they are picked at the peak of ripeness when they have the most nutrients, and they lose very little nutrients when they're frozen. And then they're never going to go bad. So you don't, I mean, not never, but like they'll get freezer burned, but you don't have to worry about, oh, they got moldy. They're not going to get moldy. Seasonal produce is another great way to save money, and you can look into boxes like Imperfect Foods or Misfit Markets where they send you the less pretty but perfectly fine produce or other types of food straight to your door. You can customize your box to get what you like and what you want to eat. And then grocery stores like Grocery Outlet are another great thing. You have to look past a lot of the traditional frankenfoods or unhealthy options, but there are often a lot of gems like organic produce, grass-fed beef, and so much more that you can get for a fraction of the price. I'm seriously such a big Grocery Outlet fan that I think it's probably going to be etched on my tombstone. Grocery Outlet, bargain market. I love it. At the end of the day, y'all, we do not need to overcomplicate this. We need to get back to the basics. just like our ancestors did. And trust me when I say that knowledge is power. I know you might feel overwhelmed. I know you might feel shame right now, but you are walking away, hopefully, from this webinar with more info than you had before. Allow that to be empowering. The word power is right in there. And I love this quote from Maya Angelou: do the best that you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. This is that moment. We now know better. So, what are we going to do better? So, we're going to check in again. We're post webinar at the end of this. Do you feel more or less confident making food choices that are going to support health for you? We are really curious to hear. And to someone who asked, it's misfit markets and imperfect foods is the other one. Look at all of these friends feeling more confident. I love it so much. Amazing. And it's understandable also for those of you feeling less confident because we just did a serious brain dump of nutrition and that can feel overwhelming. But I love seeing so many people are feeling more confident. Ashley, we have a couple minutes, right? Do we have some
Absolutely.
questions?
Yes, we do. Let me share these results so everyone can kind of see it
Okay,
really is overwhelming that most people do feel more confident, which I am
love it.
love to see. Yes, absolutely. So we'll share those results so everyone can see. And then yeah, let's hop over to the Q&A. We have a little less than probably got 4 minutes right now. And let's see, I'll get rid of that. Um, I'm just gonna go.
I'll address number one. Do you divide by four for added sugars as well? You divide by total sugar, and that's going to tell you the teaspoon equivalent. So sometimes the sugar will be coming from naturally occurring things like that Yoplait did have real fruit, and the dividing total sugars by four is going to account for the sugar in the real fruit as well.
Okay. Um, have someone with gastroparesis, I believe. Does something like vagal toning you were discussing help with those with slower digestion? What about the speed of
That
digestion?
is a great question, and I cannot speak specifically to gastroparesis because I'm not familiar with that. But you are never going to go wrong with vagal toning because the nervous system and activating the parasympathetic nervous system tells your body, hey, I'm safe. I can do the things that I need to do. I can engage in these natural, non-survival processes like digestion. So I'm going to go with yes, but I'm not familiar with gastroparesis.
All right. What about suggestions for people who have unhealthy relationships with food in
Mm.
terms of, eating disorders, damaging mental health, how to not use food as comfort when stress or other things make our unhealthy habits hard to address or improve? That's a great question.
It is a really good question, and it is seriously something that so many of us struggle with. I would say if you are not already working with a mental health care provider that specializes in this type of stuff, even if it's maybe you don't need someone who actually is like an eating disorder specialist, but you need someone that understands this, is going to help you learn to sit with these emotions, to pause, to recognize them, to be able to process them and move them through your body. That is what I would definitely say. I think there's a lot of power in the pause. In if you have a cupboard where you're like, oh gosh, it's where all my stuff is that I totally binge on. And maybe you put something on it that's going to make it more difficult to open that cupboard. So it's a stopgap that forces you to just be like, okay, wait, am I hungry or am I insert whatever common emotion you're feeling like that you often feel, you know what I mean? But that would be you need to work with a specialized mental health professional when it comes to things related to disordered eating and mental health. There's a lot there. I love that question and I just want you to know that you're completely not alone.
I'm gonna jump in here really quickly. We're going to do a lightning round. I'm going to say a
Okay.
word, give a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Oh,
Don't get to
fun.
give any context. If you want to provide context, you can get. We'll do it in the shared
I
resources.
love it.
Okay. Sourdough bread, thumbs up. Um,
Sideways.
sideways. Okay. Vegan diet, vegetarian, ancestral. All right, we figured that.
Shock.
Liquid IVs, so like hydration packets. Okay. Um, Let's see what if there's any other ones I can do in this for shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. Tracking. Oh, no, no, that's not a good one. Prebiotics.
Ooh, I can't do a thumbs up on that. It's so bio-individual. You need to do a stool test because your microbiome might need pre and probiotics and it might not.
Okay, that was pre and pro. Okay, and then adding cucumbers and lemon to your water.
Sounds awesome.
Okay. All right. There are more questions we didn't get to, and as you kind of alluded to, you may not be able, to answer all of them because some of them might be like you need to talk to a specific healthcare provider, or this is the kind of
Totally.
person you want to talk to. So I know
Yeah.
that we'll take some time to answer those and include those in the follow-up resources. But we are at our time, Karen. I want to just give you a moment if there's anything you want to say to close, and then we will sign off for the day.
I just want to say thank you all so much for being here and for trusting me to bring this really valuable info to you. Know that you are not alone. There are so many of us that are swimming upstream with you, and you can do it. Little changes matter, so don't overhaul your whole life. Just try and do one thing a little bit better tomorrow. And I'm here to support you however I can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Look for your email or an email from us in the next week with all of the resources we mentioned. And yeah, just thank you all for being here and participating in our 2026 self-care series. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.